Hello, everyone. The founder of We Are No Code, and I'm here with two amazing entrepreneurs, young guys who have built a badass company in the no code space. It's called Memberstack. Duncan Hamra, I hope I'm saying that right, and Tyler Bell. They're the co-founders. They are both developers. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so stoked to have a conversation with you guys around what you guys built.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much for having us on. This is so cool. So I guess, and real quick caveat. So I guess I would consider myself maybe a front-end developer, maybe, but I'd say I definitely fall more into the no-code bucket than code. Up until we recently made our first dev hire, Tyler was the only developer on the team shipping code. Everything else was no code.
Yeah. We had our first developer join us about four or 5 weeks ago, so we're really happy about that.
That's super exciting. You must be more excited than anyone, right? You're like,
I think so.
Finally, I don't have to write each line of code individually. So why don't you guys tell us what Memberstack is about, and then we'll get into kind of like talking about no code and your journey as entrepreneurs too.
Yeah. So I think our goal for Memberstack is just to make it as easy as possible to add a paywall or user account to a website. And I guess like the longer version of that is, it's like, thanks to all these really cool website builders and front end like frameworks, it's never been easier to build a UI, but it's still difficult to actually like plug in a backend to that, to have payments, to have user accounts. That's still pretty difficult. So now that Memberstack exists, a couple like cool use cases. We just had like this team a couple months ago or a couple weeks ago, spin up a website on a weekend, put like a digital download behind a paywall, and they made almost $1 million in a week. Just by that front end in Memberstack. And then we have some other companies who are just using the user accounts, no payments, to like manage their applicant tracking process or to build a learning management system. So it's really cool to see what people are doing with like no code tools or code to just build things on top of Memberstack.
Very cool. Yeah, no, I love that. I think that it's like you guys definitely have a prominent place now. And you only launched really 2 years ago. So, I mean, you've gone through a pretty large amount of growth in a very short amount of time. Why don't you tell us a little bit what that was like? Because I know we talked offline a little bit, and you told me that there was kind of this moment. At first, you went into this like a lot of entrepreneurs do. I have a cool idea. I want to execute on it. I'm going to build it, and they will come, which is a terrible mistake, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think that you guys kind of like realized that at a point where you had built part of it, and then you kind of dug into, okay, what do we have to do? What do we have to learn to be able to build this into an actual company, not just a product? Tell us about that transition. It's super interesting.
Yeah. So I guess, yeah, Tyler, we'll just jump back and forth on the answer to this, but maybe if it's all right, we can kind of like go back in time a little bit. I'll do like the super Cliff Notes version, but we actually met in preschool. We've been best friends for a very long time. And I probably at some point in high school, you decided it's like, all right, like let's start a business of some kind. And that just like evolved over time. Started out with a landscaping business. Then we built our first like software thing where we just like hired someone to help us build it. And then went to school to learn design and development. And during that time, that was when we definitely had that mentality of like, if we build it, they will come. Like we recognized that marketing and sales was not a skill set that we had or really something that we enjoyed. It always felt kind of gross to us, but we've learned a lot since then. But I think the transition point was actually when we started Memberstack. We transitioned from like, if we build it, they will come sort of mentality, where it's all about the idea or the thing, to there are a bunch of people here standing around waiting for something, begging for something that's like really valuable, but no one's actually built it yet. Like, let's try to build it. That was pretty much how we got into it.
Yeah.
Love it. And so that's interesting, because that really is what currently, would be kind of customer discovery, customer development, and kind of identifying the problem and then addressing that specific problem, right? So did you have like a formal way of really doing that? Were you having like customer discussions? Were you just seeing this stuff pop up on Twitter? Was it like on forums? Like, where did you start realizing that there was a problem?
Yeah, Tyler, what do you think? Because I feel like you were the first one to like articulate it. There was like this aha moment.
Well, I remember we realized that we personally, we had the problem first. Like we were building another software product at the time called Formatically. And we got to the point where we were trying to add user accounts and payments to it. And I was like, this is just way too complicated. Like, it shouldn't be this complicated just to add user accounts and payments. And then Duncan, I know you worked for a design agency at one point, and the design agency had the same problem, which they had clients that wanted this additional functionality on top of whatever website builder they were using, and they just wouldn't be able to do it. And they were having to turn clients down. So we saw this problem beforehand, and we were like, okay, let's think about a product that we could build that we could use ourselves. So even if no one else used it, we would be happy, and we could just use it, personally.
Mm-hmm.
And luckily, when we started thinking about that and started kind of looking around to see if other people were having the problem, that's when we were like, whoa, so many people are having this exact same problem as we are. And then that's kind of, I feel like that was kind of like the start in our minds where we're like, okay, this is something we could actually build, and there are people that would use it.
Mm-hmm. And how we like validated that idea was, well, whenever we had the idea, once Tyler had articulated it, instantly in my mind was like a landing page of what that needed to look like for like someone like me. What would that look like if we built it? So we put up a quick landing page with just an email capture and a more detailed form that asked a few questions like, how much would you be willing to pay for this? How soon do you need it? Sort of thing. And we had enough interest early on to say, you know what? Let's like just start an agency doing this. Let's just say that we do this now, and we will figure it out on the fly, and maybe we'll get a couple grand per project. And hopefully, and the goal was like all the while building up a list of people who do want this, but aren't willing to pay 10 grand or whatever to have like a custom web app built. So that was how we were able to, like, we had a hunch, right? But it wasn't, we weren't sure, we weren't actually confident until we put that price tag on it.
And I love that. That's actually a great lesson. And you guys kind of like, I don't know if you did it on purpose or not, but you kind of hacked the like how to build a startup methodology that's really like kind of out there, because it's like, at first you don't have to build out the whole product. You need to really prove the customer demand, and not just like the customer demand in terms of like, oh, this is what people are saying, but like, what are people clicking on? What are people paying for? Are people actually willing to put down money for that? And then making something that maybe seemed like it was like a solution that was all there done for you. You kind of like, we're doing it manually in the back end, taking in the requests and then like fulfilling. And then as you fulfill, basically you start having money, first of all, to be able to build it further. And then you also know that you're onto something that has larger potential. So I think that that's really cool. Was that by mistake, or were you guys like really going into sort of startup methodology and doing it purposefully?
I think that was 100% intentional. We had already made the mistake for a good 4 years or whatever during high school and college with Formatically. At that point, it was all about like, this isn't good enough. We can't charge for this yet. It has to be perfect. And then only at the end, whenever we actually put a price tag on it and said, okay, this isn't going to scale the way we thought it was going to for all that time. It's like, whatever we do next, we are doing the opposite. We are going to put a like 10x price tag on what we think it's worth. We're going to talk to the people who want it the most, and we're going to listen to them really well.
Yeah, that's amazing. So tell us about, sorry, go ahead, Tyler.
Oh, I was just going to add, I was going to say, the first iteration of Memberstack actually didn't even have payments. I remember like the first customers that were using the app that we built, we were like, all right, whatever you do, don't click this button because it's going to break. Don't click that button because it's going to break. And it was super buggy, but we just wanted to get it out there as soon as possible.
And it's funny, when he says payments, it was on both sides. Like our customers couldn't get payments, and we could not accept payments. We manually sent everybody Stripe invoices or like FreshBooks invoices or something at the beginning. Because like, and that's like evidence for Memberstack, is that it took us an extra month to build it into the product, but we wanted to launch. We wanted to get it live. So now it's like, if we did it again with Memberstack, we could have just done it like in a weekend.
Yeah, doing it the right way, man. Like getting it out there when you feel highly uncomfortable about having it out there, because you have to tell customers like this. I love that story from Tyler. Like having to tell customers like, don't press that button. Everything's going to break. Don't touch this button. Like, I mean, I think that it takes a certain amount of courage and experience to be able to do that, and to believe that, and that's what I constantly tell people is like, listen, if your value proposition to end customers is not strong enough for them to deal with, let's call it a subpar product, then there's maybe a bigger problem happening here, right? That we have to address. And that's something that I constantly I'm trying to wire into the minds of the entrepreneurs that I train. That's very, very cool. So tell us about that moment where you had built a first something, and then you realized you had to learn these other skills. Like, how did you go about that? Did you kind of say what do we have to learn? Let's go and learn it. Did you get advisors? Like, what was the approach?
I know Formatically was probably, I think that there's 2 times we did this recently. We're doing it literally every day now. But with Formatically, the big transition was, all right, we have this application that we had built by someone on Upwork. But we can't make changes unless it's through them. It's very expensive to maintain. If we want to be able to do this, we're going to need certain skills. I'm going to need to know how to design things. We're going to need to know how to write code. So that was when we decided. And at that point in our lives, we were planning on going to college. So it seemed like it didn't feel weird to pick where we were going. I say it did get weird once I discovered Webflow and I realized my degree was obsolete. So I ended up dropping out, and then getting that job for that agency. I got lucky quite a few times along the way. But yeah, that was the first transition.
So you hopped into no code, actually. Webflow is definitely a prominent no code tool at this point. And so, yeah, for the front end, that makes a lot of sense. So you guys, that's interesting, because then as soon as you had sort of Memberstack at a good point, you were already part of this no code community and were understanding the needs that these people, these makers were kind of having, right? So I guess then it was a pretty easy approach to have conversations with those other makers and be like, hey, are you also struggling with this problem of not knowing how to manage your sort of members, right?
Exactly. Right. It was very easy to find who we needed to talk to very quickly, which I think is just a good proxy for because it's not even about the idea, right? It's just about, are you identifying a real problem that real people have? And then can you call them or message them or talk to them? It's if you can do that, then it's at the end of the day, it's not even about the product, really. It's about what does it do for the person, which I think is why Memberstack worked early on, even whenever there was no product. It was just Tyler and I doing whatever we had to do to help them solve their problem. And then our problem was automating that, right? That's our problem at that point. But up until then, it's just about helping that person accomplish some goal. That's
super powerful. I love it. Yeah, I feel like you guys learned a lot of stuff from your past ventures that you brought on with you. And even though certain things weren't learned from a startup book or something, it definitely falls into kind of the experience bucket where you're oh, I made those mistakes in the past venture. We're not going to make those mistakes again. We're going to make new mistakes.
Yes.
Very cool. So how about the business side? It sounds like you're a front-end developer. Tyler, you're kind of a back-end developer. Tell me about the process of kind of getting into the business and marketing side of things. And yeah, I mean, it sounds like the messaging was kind of your biz dev. Was that mainly through Twitter? Was it through forums? Was it what were some of the strategies you used early on?
Yeah, I think our most successful kind of growth channels early were just Facebook groups, the forums, releasing freebies. So I was creating just free little templates and resources that had Memberstack or the early versions of Memberstack installed, but you didn't have to use them. You could just remove that and then take whatever you wanted from it. So it was really just about trying to be helpful, however that meant. More than half of our early conversations, we didn't recommend Memberstack or what we were doing. It was just, we thought they had a similar problem, and then we would go find another tool and help them with that. So it was just about being helpful.
And so at this point, let's say that what are some of the other tools that you guys maybe use internally or recommend some of your customers to use? Because Webflow connects with Memberstack. Then what are some of the other no-code tools that people will use? I'm guessing Zapier is probably one of them. Google Sheets is probably another. Tell me what the classic stack of someone who's using your technology is adopting from a no-code point of view.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what do you think, Tyler? I know we see quite a few tools.
I mean, definitely Zapier. We see Zapier all the time. It seems like if you're using Webflow, it's just you're automatically using Zapier for something else, or if you're using Memberstack. Another one I think would be Airtable. We use Airtable a lot for Memberstack, and just seeing what you can do with Airtable as far as like the analytics goes, and just like you can pretty much build really anything you would want that's kind of data related in Airtable, which is really cool to see. Figuring that it is no code, so people that typically would have to pay like a developer to build something could, most of the time do it in Airtable.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, those are like the first few that come to mind.
That's awesome. So yeah, let's get into no code in general. Like, this is definitely breaking down barriers. Duncan, why don't you talk to us about that first moment when you discovered like Webflow and started playing around? Like, what was that feeling of like, oh man, I don't have to write code to build awesome stuff? And then yeah, what are your thoughts about the ecosystem in general?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the journey went a little something like, started at the Art Institute, getting a degree in graphic and web design, spent about 3 months there, and then towards the end of my time there, they had a senior demo day. And that previous weekend, I had discovered Webflow. So I had set up a template, I had started to play with it. I go into demo day, and not by like my own credit, like just what Webflow allowed me to do, that website I had built was better than most of the senior projects. And that for me is like, that's what I'm paying for. Literally what y'all have on that table right there is what I'm paying for. And I just built something better this weekend. I'm gone. I'm out. See you all later. And then I had to explain it to my parents and all that good stuff, but get buy-in from everyone around me. But yeah, once that was done, the thing that really helped me with Webflow though, and this is interesting, and what I think is like the distinction between like a true no-code tool versus just like a regular piece of software, is that I had actually just taken an HTML and CSS course through Code Academy when I discovered Webflow. And that foundation, at that point, I knew how to set up a one-page website just with HTML and CSS. When I found Webflow, the aha moment was instant, right? Because Webflow is not just like, it's not a plug-in, drag and drop website builder where it's like you can do whatever you want. You have to, it's constrained to the like underlying tech, right? It respects the end result and the medium. It respects the medium. I think that might be the key distinction. So it's harder, but the learning curve is significantly less. It took me a couple months to become really good at it versus what would have taken me many years if I was just working in a text editor. And I think it's the same thing with tools like Airtable or Zapier, where they respect the medium. It's not always the most intuitive, but as soon as you know it, oh my gosh, you just like jump to the front of the line. And that's what we're trying to do with Memberstack too. It's easier said than done, but our goal is to get it as low level functionality as possible so that people can set up like what it is they want to do, where we're not a gatekeeper as much as we're just like a UI for what people are already doing over and over and over again.
Yep. Love it. I really love that. And that's like, because that's like literally like you're preaching to the choir, because we know that there's such a big gap between humans and the technology and these no-code tools. And so our big thing is all about empowering these humans by like teaching them, not just one, but several tools to be able to actually build stuff themselves. And I think that's the big disconnect I see, right? It's actually, there's a lot of stuff is out there, but people are terrified. You look at people who everyone thinks they need to learn how to code, and they don't realize that these tools have come from far. And I see so much hate around like developers hating on like the no code movement, because they think, I don't know if it's because they think it is going to replace them, or they like actually believe that these tools have not progressed as quickly as they can. Like some people like checked them out maybe 3 years ago, and Webflow 3 years ago had nothing to do with what it really is today, right? And a lot of these other tools as well, I think. And so it's like either people don't really know or they feel threatened. But I'd say it's probably pretty healthy for people to have a lot of like rejection towards this idea, because I believe that this is the future of building businesses. The capabilities that I'm starting to see are like people giving API connections to much deeper tech as well, like AR elements, like machine learning algorithms, AI. And I think that slowly, as we build like these front-end experiences, attach them to member areas like Memberstack, and really build these, maybe have the database live on Airtable, build some analytics as well around that. Like man, we can start bringing in all these other elements too, right? And that's where I think like we're getting to a place that people don't realize is gonna really allow. Like right now, you can probably build 90% of all like tech solutions without code. I think for that extra 10%, but that changes a lot of things. It doesn't only change the like the maker and the builder and the entrepreneurship community. It also changes like the investment community, because suddenly you're going to have like a rise of like $5 to $15 million a year companies, and that's really the dream of most people, right? It's like, let's build a big company and let's own most of it, which is kind of counterintuitive when you look at the classic sort of VC path where you're raising lots of different rounds of investment. Have you guys taken an investment?
Yes, we did. We haven't like announced who or how much yet. That's coming probably this summer. But we did. And I'm curious. At some point I want to circle back because I'm curious what Tyler would say about the developers, because I know we've heard a mix, like some people who kind of like reject it, but then some people really love it. So
I think those people are the smartest people, because I think like if you can understand that your custom code writing is basically best applied to solving those certain more complicated problems and not building probably the majority, which you can do with no code quicker, then you're really using your time more effectively. And that's what my argument is. It's like developers should be learning this. It's sad that a lot of developers think this is against them. Tyler, what do you think?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I've talked to quite a few developers over the past like year and a half, and I would say it's definitely a mix. So I would say maybe 50% developers like really love the no code space, especially if they're charging a high hourly rate, because what they're finding is that they're able to do what they typically could have done with code a lot quicker and charge the same price for it. So they end up essentially making more money. But then you have developers, and I think this is mainly front-end developers, just based on like what I've seen with Webflow, that they've learned HTML, they've learned CSS. You could really consider them experts on it, like they're the best of the best. And then they see Webflow come along, and someone that doesn't know how to code can spend 5 minutes in Webflow to recreate what it would take them like a day, even though they're an expert. And I think that makes them feel threatened, like Duncan said. And that makes them feel like pretty uneasy, because they're like, whoa, what about these 15 years of work I have of becoming an expert? Why should I like this product? So I think that's kind of where you start to see the problem, where some developers aren't really like super invested in the no code space.
I love that. Yeah, that it is a little bit the fear of progress, right? I also would say like, listen, like some people are so good at development and using open source and sort of reusing certain elements that they've created. It's like coding is the quicker way for them, like than to learn how to no code. Maybe not in the longer term, but in the short term. It's all means to an end. And I think like, as you kind of mentioned, like knowing a little bit, having a base, like Duncan talked about this earlier on, like having a good basis in some of the coding languages which are important to you, and then stepping into the no code space. It's so empowering, because you have a basis, and then you just realize that there's a whole other level of things that you can build so that your efforts can be best utilized.
I think the best no code tools anticipate you coming out the other side and then wanting to do more, right? And this is also where it gets tough as you're like building a product, is how do you make a thing that is like essentially like on a scale of brand new to total expert. I feel like no code can take up the middle, like maybe bottom to middle 80%. And then there will be this like piece on the end that sometimes like, my hands are tied. But if you find really good tools, they'll let you still do that stuff. And that's another benefit too, I think, is actually like tools like Webflow or Memberstack. They teach you the underlying principles for how to do that thing, whether it's like building software or thinking about like information architecture. Like those are skills that you're able to pick up and learn just by using the tool, which actually makes it easier, so you can come out on the other side faster and actually do pick up a little more code or whatever.
I love it. I totally love it. I totally believe in you guys' mission. So now let's take a step back and talk a little bit about like your experience as entrepreneurs. Like you've learned a lot of stuff throughout these couple companies that you guys have built. Memberstack being really the most prominent and latest thing that you guys are working on full time right now. What are some of the lessons that you might, have for people who are trying to get into this, or people who have ideas and they want to execute on them, like, based on maybe some of your own personal mistakes, or just in general?
The first thing I think of, Tyler, is with both so we had a landscaping company in high school, and then with Formatically, with the lawn care company, we weren't solving our own problem, right? We had no empathy for most of the people who we were working for. We loved them, like they were wonderful people, but it was hard to care so much about, like, oh, that little bead of grass isn't cut over there. She's like, I'm not a homeowner. I don't care, I guess, about how my grass looks. So I didn't have a lot of empathy, which made it difficult. When things got hard, we didn't feel like we were on the same team as them. Same thing with Formatically. It felt like it was kind of like us and the students versus the schools, which is kind of, I think, how we kind of saw ourselves in high school anyway. It just felt like we were always kind of fighting the schools. But with Memberstack, I think we actually like took that lesson and said, like, let's find a problem, and all the people who want it are like already our friends or people who we really want to meet. Which means every time I have to get on a call, I get excited. I'm very excited. And if we ever like have a bug or there's a problem, we're on the same team. It's like, it's us just trying to solve a problem now.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll add to that. I'll say, like, launch as early as you can. Like, don't wait. Like, we talk to a lot of business owners every day, and some of them have these really awesome products that they've already created. And we'll say, so when's this live? Like, when can we go and start using this? And they kind of like, well, I don't like the logo, so I'm going to tweak the logo a little bit, and that should be done in another week. And I don't like this page, like I need to redesign that. And it's like, no, you just need to go ahead and launch this, so you start getting feedback.
Mm-hmm. Totally love it, because you know what I think that ultimately is, like, on a psychological level, it's like, as entrepreneurs or as business people, we take what we do professionally as such a core part of our identity. So the idea that we might fail at something is so tragic to us in terms of like challenging that identity, that we push away the launch in fear of failure. Really, that's what it really is. It's like, oh, if this is not completely perfect, like, I won't have maximized my chance and I'll hate myself for. And the truth is the opposite, right? Is like, the more that you're delaying, the more that you are really not having to face the fact that you will have to solve 100 new problems as soon as you launch. And then your logo needing a little tweak will be totally minor compared to. And if you look at all the greatest companies, a lot of them rebrand their logos, like, change a bunch of stuff along the way, reiterate. Like, even Airbnb, they grew into a $1 billion company and then they changed their entire branding. Same thing with Slack, same thing with, so I think it's something that, like, yeah, as humans, we just have to encourage, having gone through it ourselves, and it makes people feel uncomfortable. And I think that's why they're not willing to, like, take that step, but it's like, hey, entrepreneurship is uncomfortable.
Yes. And actually, you saying all that, I think that's 100% correct. And kind of like an insight I just had while you were saying that is how we launched Memberstack was interesting in hindsight. We didn't do this intentionally, but that day we had the idea, there was a landing page published and shared with a few people. It was like plain text. I changed the color a dozen times that week, but it was launched and in somebody's hands that day. And we just made changes, and all the changes were always in production. So there were some days where, like, you'd like go to the marketing site and there'd probably be like half the page would be all wonky and weird, but it was live. There was never a launch moment. It was always getting feedback, always talking to people, and it was less scary. But now fast forward, I did like a UI change where I worked on a whole bunch of onboarding changes, and it became a launch. It became this stressful thing where, oh, it's been quiet for 2 months. When I release this, if it fails, I failed. If I had just released individual changes as we went, that never would have happened. So I think that's a really valuable insight there.
I love that. And specifically with like UI changes, there's so many haters, right? Like, you look at like Slack's latest launch, like, so much haters came out and said, oh, it's terrible. Uber, like the guy who got fired, right? Like, after rebranding, it's like, And I think that it's just that people like get used to certain things, and people are really hard on like really dumb things when it comes down to it. Like, like this was not going to change you guys' entire business. It was just making things slowly better and better. And I love that. I don't even think launch should be a thing. There should just be a moment where, yes, if you come out with a new iteration, like you said, of the UI, or if you come up with a new feature, you make like a nice newsletter about it. You might do, but I think it's kind of like this whole idea of launch is like people think of it as some kind of like a gala dinner where you're going to invite Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie, and then after that, like you're going to have hundreds of millions of users, and that's just not the reality when you're launching a company. It's like just get it out there and realize all the issues you have. Then it's a first test. It's not even a launch. Like, so yeah, I kind of don't like that terminology, but like that's the reality. Everyone's launching their cool new startup. Well, guys, I mean, first of all, thank you so much for giving our students discounts to Memberstack. Like as we continue to have companies and entrepreneurs, work with us so we can help them adopt no code and become sort of independent entrepreneurs. We know that Memberstack is going to be an important part of that. So we thank you so much for that. Where can people find you?
Yeah, I think the best place is just Memberstack.com or Memberstack.io. Either of those links will get you to the right place.
Nice. And if they want to hit you guys up individually, would that be through Twitter, LinkedIn?
Good question, actually. I'm really bad at Twitter replying on time, but I'd say
Same here.
Our Slack group would probably be a good place to send us a message. Start a conversation in the forum. Yeah, if you find our contact information somewhere, send us a message, and we'll get to it as soon as we find it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, that's so cool, guys. I appreciate you guys joining this conversation. I think that you guys have such a great future in front of you. You're in your mid-20s. You've already built such an awesome company. I'm excited to see how this moves forward. I'm also really excited to hear the announcement of the investment when you guys are ready to talk about that.
Sweet. And thank you again for this. This has been really fun.
This has been great.
Absolutely. You guys are awesome, and I wanted people to know that. So I will send you a link to this video afterwards. Thanks so much for joining. People who watched, thank you for joining too. And guys, best of luck for the next step in your company.
Thanks so much. Hope to talk soon.
Yeah, take care.